For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on StratNewsGlobal. Good evening, I'm Surya Gangadharan. China's 20th Party Congress formally opened on Sunday in Beijing with a work report by President Xi Jinping. So we're going to decipher exactly what that work report says. It says a lot of things. And we've got General Narasimhan, the director of the Center for Contemporary Chinese Studies, a think tank. He was also a defense attache in Beijing some years ago. Welcome, sir. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Surya.
Sir, Xi Jinping has said that the goal is to build a modern socialist China in all respects. Now, I thought that was something China already is. Am I missing something here?
I don't think you're missing anything, Surya. The thing is that, in the Chinese method of doing things, anything that they are doing, they'll repeat it time and again to ensure that, it is actually fed into the system, and also ensure that everybody in China actually understands what it is. So I don't think anything new in that. Modern socialist China is what they have been saying for a long time. However, the only thing is, in the Communist Party's methodology of doing things, they keep mentioning it time and again. So that is something that you need to keep in mind.
Is it something to keep the cadres also ensure that their obedience across the board, even with the PLA?
It is even this statement you will get to hear time and again, that PLA is party's army, and there should be implicit obedience
Yeah.
of party's orders by the PLA. That again, at least I have been hearing it for the last 25 years. I mean, ever since I started watching China in 2000 onwards, I've been hearing it. And of course, that is something which they keep saying, so that, it keeps going down to the party cadres, to the last man on the ground.
Tell me, just a matter of curiosity, did the PLA at any point in time show signs of wanting to emerge from its, as an instrument of the party to as an instrument of the nation, something of that kind?
You see, in as far as China goes, I think party and the state are almost the same. I mean, party is the one which runs the state, and again, any kind of obedience to party is what is being talked about. That is the regime protection, regime security of the regime is something that is generally talked about. So, to that extent, there has been no let up in this. Actually speaking, the Chinese People's Liberation Army has never shown any intention to move away from the party, because they
Mhm.
also know they draw the power from the party. So the Central Military Commission also is party Central Military Commission. Though of course they have a state Central Military Commission, which is a similar mirror image of the party Central Military Commission. The this thing is keep on being told to them, and the PLA itself, I think, have never shown any intention to move away from the party.
Mhm. Also, again, another just for general interest, the Communist Party has millions of members. I'm told 100 million members or
96 million.
so.
96
96
million.
million. So that's huge. I mean, it gives them a certain legitimacy too, doesn't it?
It does. See, the social contract of the Chinese Communist Party with the people is very simple. Party says, "I will give you a good standard of life. I'll give you a wealthy life. You support me." That is the social contract, that is the party, between the party and the people. So that continues even today. So even Xi Jinping's common prosperity, which he talks about, is actually keeping this thing in mind, that the social divisions that have come into the system has to be mellowed down. So to that extent, the common prosperity is actually from wealth accumulation to wealth distribution. So therefore, you find that social contract between the party and the people is actually that I'll give you a good standard of living, you support me. So that continues even today.
Mhm. Okay. Now, Xi Jinping in his work report has called for building material and technological foundations without which no modern socialist society can be built. Now, can you explain what is he talking about here?
I can explain this. See, Xi Jinping, starting from about 2017 onwards, have been making a mention of a modern technological society based on innovation. Innovation is the key thing that he has been talking about over a period of time. It is not only today or yesterday.
Mhm.
So they have understood that for any society to be to be modern in its own outlook as well as to develop itself has to work on these issues, that they should have material issues, they should have the modern technological advantages and the advances that they need to make. That is something that they have to constantly be working at. So that is why you find his mention about the modern and technological kind of a society that he is trying to build. So again, this is also has got relevance to the technological regime being denied by the Western society
Mhm.
to China. So that shows that they themselves has to do what they have to do. They can't be relying on the Western governments or the society, which are actually trying to deny them the technology. So to that extent, I think within the country itself, they are trying to build the technological advances within the country, and to do that, they've taken a number of measures which we can talk about.
Mhm. So this recent announcement of the US pulling the plug on chip makers based in China, has that come as a shock to these guys? Were they preparing for it?
I think they were expecting this to happen. And over a period of time, if you look at it, they have started making a lot of investments in SMIC, that is the semiconductor manufacturing industry of China. Okay,
Mhm.
to wean away from the TSMC, which is the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company. So you find that decoupling slowly has started as far as that is concerned. And this and another thing that we need to keep in mind is that SMIC has recently announced that they are capable of building 7 nanometer chips, which is
Mhm.
fairly high in terms of technology. That they have already started achieving. And for most of the applications that any country needs to have today, even the Western countries, even very high nanometer chips are adequate. Like, for example, either 24 or beyond are
Mhm.
also adequate to do this. Only a few high tech kind of experiments and high tech kind of requirements like AI, quantum technologies, they need the very minimal nanometer kind of technology. So to that extent, I think the Chinese are already preparing for it. Chinese are working towards achieving the self-sufficiency in that case. In fact, last year they produced that 359 billion chips. That means 1 billion chips a day they have been producing last year. This year, of course, there
Mhm.
has been a reduction. The reasons are different. So as far as semiconductor is concerned, they knew that it is coming. I am sure they are preparing to overcome that shortfall that they have.
Mhm. And a lot of this is exported.
A lot of this is exported, yes. Like, for example, for India, many of your automobile sectors, many of your other electrical equipment, etc., most of the chips are coming from China, even today.
Mhm.
So they are exporting a lot of these chips.
So there is also a reference in Xi Jinping's work report to reform and opening up. Is this with respect to the economy? I mean, so far, what we've seen has been in the reverse.
It appears that it has been in the reverse. Actually, this reform and opening up is not new. This is actually known as Kaika Kaifang in Chinese, which Deng Xiaoping started in 1978.
Mm.
Kaika Kaifang. That is actually opening up on reform and opening up. So that is a thing that they are trying to. They put it in all the documents that are there to show that they are still opening up and they are still reforming. Reforms are actually twofold. One is internal reforms, which they need to undertake in terms of their financial management, in terms of their bad banks, etc. That is something that they need to be looking at, and I'm sure they'll be looking at it in some point. The other thing that is talked about is the systems. Within the country, you find the anti-corruption drive going up, other things are going up. That is actually the systems. So systems and financial equipment, financial management, etc. These are the reforms that they are talking about. Opening up before 78, China was considered to have a bamboo curtain because nothing was allowed inside, nothing was allowed to go out.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it has become much more open. So that process they are wanting to continue. But yes, there has been, like you said, you're right. To some extent, after Mr. Xi Jinping has come to power, you find a certain rollback of this opening up process. Like, for example, there have been reports, analysts have been saying that he is taking China back to the Maoist days, is what is being talked about. So that is something which has happened over a period of time. Notwithstanding that, I think they will like to open up as much as they can so that they can mutually benefit from what has been achieved on the outside also. So both these things are going to go simultaneously. How far they will succeed, how far they will go, is something that we'll have to wait and see in the next 5 years.
Mhm. So, is this something which you expect to happen after this Congress gets over and they get back to implementing, or is this something already
Uh,
in process?
it is already in process. I would say that this kind of a thing has already been in process. Like, for example, the crackdown on many of the high-tech companies that they did in the last couple of years,
Yeah.
the crackdown on the real estate sector that they have done. So these were actually things in process already. They will want, what I expect is that after the party congress, the same systems will continue, the same kind of crackdowns will continue, and this is a process that I think is got some more life left. So it will keep going further up the ladder, even in the future.
Mhm. Xi Jinping has talked of launching projects of national and strategic importance. Is this a clear reference to defense?
I don't think it is a clear reference only to defense. See, in the Chinese system, they don't announce anything unless they put the building blocks in place.
Mhm.
Like, for example, what he is talking about is, my understanding is that he is talking about the global security initiative, the global development initiative that they have already announced. The global security initiative was announced by Mr. Xi Jinping in POA forum in April this year. And from that time onwards, they have been trying to explain what GSI is, and they have been trying to push it wherever the bilateral meetings or multilateral meetings are taking place. So this is something that you will get to see. This is one of the projects that he is talking about. The Global Development Initiative was started earlier. He talked about there is a group of friends who has been actually formed to push this agenda of global development initiative. And the global development initiative is typically the pushing of the sustainable development goals 2030 of the United Nations. They have just
Mhm.
mounted this GDI onto that and trying to push it as a global initiative for development. And so even the UN has started supporting it now. They've got a group of friends which has got about approximately 50 countries, which I just met recently also. And they also try to support this global development initiative. So these are certain initiatives and strategic projects that Mr. Xi Jinping would like to give. Within the country, this is outside the country, right? Within the country, there are two things that he talks about. One is common prosperity, which I explained to you earlier, which is from wealth accumulation to wealth distribution to people who need it. And the second thing is he talked about, which doesn't find a mention in the work report, but that will come up in some form or the other. That is a dual circulation strategy. The dual circulation strategy is basically because they realized that the export oriented economy is not going to sustain themselves basically because of the problems they have in the international market. So
Mhm.
they wanted to improve the domestic consumption. So the internal circulation refers to domestic consumption, not only consumption, manufacturing, supply chain, and consumption domestically, and also the external circulation, which is the export oriented model. So these are the projects that he is talking about. In addition to this, you will also find certain infrastructure projects coming up. Like, for example, in the 14th Party Congress, for the 14th 5-year plan, which came up earlier, they talked about even the the giant dams that are going to be built up. So these are issues that are going to come up in terms of projects, in terms of initiatives, etc. So these are the things that I think he's talking about.
Mhm. Does the BRA get enmeshed in this SDG, the sustainable
Yes,
goals and all that?
you're right. In fact, you know what GSI says, the Global Security Initiative says that they want to create a alternative security architecture in the world. Okay, that is one of the tenets of Global Security
Mhm.
Initiative. The Global Development Initiative will also combine this One Belt One Road initiative. But the point that we need to understand is the One Belt One Road initiative, the investments into it have reduced since 2019 onwards.
Mhm.
2018 was the peak. After that, it has been only reducing. So now, what they are trying to do is to bring in third-party actors into One Belt One Road initiative to fund the to fund the
Mhm.
various projects. Sorry, to fund the various projects and to keep it going. So, One Belt One Road initiative, Global Development Initiative, and also the Global Security Initiative. These are all the major projects that we are going to see going forth after the party congress.
Mhm. So the idea to bring in partners is also an admission that they can't sustain the level of investment in BRA projects, including
You're
CPEC.
right in the sense when they started with the One Belt One Road projects, the total outlay for that project was $1.4 trillion till 2030. They seem to have
Mhm.
invested somewhere around 800 odd billion dollars so far. The problem that you will find is that most of the countries in which China has gone and invested as part of One Belt One Road initiative, many of them are not able to return the money that they
Yeah.
took as loans. So they have this problem coming up. They have been rescheduling. They have been reorganizing the loans for many countries. They have done that, but I think it is not a bottomless pit that they can keep putting the money inside. I
Yeah.
think they'll need some other outside support to continue with the One Belt One Road initiative.
And is there a military element to this, strategic importance and all that?
Yeah, in the form of yes, to some extent yes. Like for example, today China has got investments in almost 100 ports all across the world. Okay,
Mhm.
and many of them are now only commercial in nature. However, there has been reports of Chinese trying to make bases, the naval bases, like for example, Ream in Cambodia, like for example, the Djibouti is already a base anyway;
Yeah.
it's known. There are many other places which have been listed that the Chinese are trying to make them into a naval base. So once that comes up, you will find for any country to deploy its power, to project its power, it needs many naval bases all around the world. So
Yeah.
you will find such a tendency coming up, if not immediately in the next 5 years, maybe 10, 15, 20 years, you will find number of these bases coming up all across the world. And therefore, it has got that security connect with what you said.
Interesting. Now let's get on to Taiwan. Taiwan seems to have got a higher profile this time in his work report. Does that suggest a certain perhaps loss of face given Nancy Pelosi's visit and all the saber rattling that China did?
Uh, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put it like that. The reason for that is very simple. When they talked about the two centenary goals, that is 2021 and 2049, one is the 100th year of the party, Communist Party is raising, and the other one is the 100th year of the PRC becoming a republic. They talked about reunification of the motherland. So reunification of the motherland includes Taiwan to come back into their fold. So
Mhm.
you talk when you talk about this, you find Hong Kong is already inside. You
Yeah.
find Macau is already inside. You find South China Sea more or less has been absorbed in terms of influence. And so what is left are mainly two things. One, the boundary dispute with India, because many of the other places they've been able to resolve it other than India and Bhutan. So India and Bhutan, some territory is left, and the other territory that is left is Taiwan. So this is something that is going to be their focus, even otherwise. So this is something that we need to be careful about. And as far as Taiwan is concerned, they've always been saying, they've been saying many things. They've been saying, firstly, the one country, two systems can be offered to Taiwan. Mr. Xi Jinping
Mhm.
himself has said that some time ago. And in
Yeah.
addition, they've always been saying that peaceful reunification is what they are looking at. However, they will not rule out use of force for unifying Taiwan into the motherland. So this thing has already been there. So there's nothing new in what Mr. Xi Jinping has said. As far
Mhm.
as Ms. Pelosi's visit is concerned, it happened, and China took certain amount of actions to show its anger on that visit, and that I think is there. Even today, the Chinese ships and the aircraft violate the median line in the Taiwan Strait almost on a
Mhm.
daily basis, and that is being put out by the Taiwanese Ministry of Defense, Ministry of National Defense. So you will find pressure being built on Taiwan continuously. That will be there, but I don't think there is any major change in the Taiwan policy that came up, except
Mhm.
for one thing, that they in this report he has said we will never rule out the use of force.
Yeah.
That probably they did not use earlier, but otherwise they are looking still for the peaceful reunification is what I personally feel.
Mhm. So, some people say that Chinese action against India is more probable, given the fact that with Taiwan, especially after the recent thing over Pelosi, seems to be a certain American commitment which is out there, So, would
See
India
the
be a more logical, you know?
you see the problem that you will find is India of today is not the India of 1962.
Hmm.
And you take your mind back. I've been saying this in many of my interviews, etc. Starting from 1967 onwards, we have always stood up to the Chinese wherever our territorial integrity and sovereignty issues are concerned. Natula onwards, you can see it. Sandrung Chu, Natula, Depsang Bulge, the Chumer, Dolam, and 2020, everywhere. Wherever the territorial integrity and sovereignty issues are concerned, we have always stood up to the Chinese. And second thing is, India is not a very small country that it can be pushed around. So Chinese also are aware of this. So they will be very cautious in doing anything with India. That is what I personally feel. On the other hand, when you look at Taiwan, though the Americans are supposed to be having the Taiwan Act of 1979, which says in one of the clauses that if a unilateral action is taken by China towards Taiwan, then US will support Taiwan to in its defense, is what it says. It doesn't say the troops will come in or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Biden, in the last 1 year, at least he has made four statements to say that they will do it. They will intervene in that case. However, immediately after each of the statements, the White House has given a different view, and they have said that there has been no change in the US's Taiwan policy. So there you find the ambiguity still there. So therefore, to say that India will be a natural choice because Taiwan is going to be difficult may not be the right way of thinking, because they will
Mm-hmm.
weigh the pros and cons of actually tackling the Indians on the border. That will be weighing on their mind quite heavily.
Mm-hmm. Um, there's this reference to dangerous storms that Xi Jinping made. What is he referring to? Is it Ukraine? Is it the fallout of the Ukraine crisis?
See, to pin that dangerous storms to Russia-Ukraine conflict will be not correct. The reason
Hmm.
why I say this is, I'll give you two or three reasons. One, at the moment, it is not Russia-Ukraine conflict is not actually affecting China in any manner.
Hmm.
In fact, it is benefiting China in some manner. One, in the Russia-China relationship, China will be having an upper hand because of the Russia-Ukraine campaign, and Russia will come out a little weaker at the end of the campaign. So that is one issue. The second issue is China looks not at Russia or Ukraine as a kind of a competition or an adversary or any kind of issue. They actually look at US as the main place, as the benchmark where they need to reach. So you will
Mhm.
find all their activities are actually focused towards that, and whatever actions US takes to thwart that kind of an effort, is the storm that will happen. That is number one. Number two, you will find the economic problems that are going to face the world in terms of, like, for example, because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and other issues, you find inflation going up in very high levels, and other issues on the economic front are troubling. So you find that that is another storm that they'll be talking about. So the third thing is, like, for example, I explained to you earlier, the global security initiative is something which they are trying to create an alternative security architecture. So that is something which is actually troubling them. So there are many of these storms which they are talking about in terms of the resistance that they will face when they want to grow and come up to the level of the US. So that is what I personally feel will be the storms that he is talking about.
So I have a question from a viewer. Why is China being so belligerent on the borders now? His name is
Arya,
Ashwin
Arya,
Dutta. Yeah.
Arya. His name is Arya.
Why is China being so belligerent on the borders now?
Okay. Like, for example, whatever happened in 2020, yes, it was a belligerence. It was something which the Chinese did to violate all the agreement that we have signed. But post 2020, did you see any kind of belligerence on the borders? I don't think anybody saw that. So the issue that comes up is 2020 is a I would say as an aberration in the entire relationship of 45 years when we didn't suffer even one casualty. So you find that after 2020, after 16 rounds of core commander level talks, you find the disengagement process has been completed in some form.
Yeah.
There are other issues to be dealt with, that's a different issue. But what I am trying to say is that post 2020, we don't see much of belligerence on the border, but there are issues that related to the line of actual control and to resolve the de-escalation process, etc., that needs to be continued. So this is something that you need to keep in mind. Line of actual control not being demarcated on ground and not accepted by both the countries will always face-offs from the patrols whenever they meet each other. But what we need to do is to ensure that these face-offs do not escalate and then come to a level where we lost men in 2020. That is what we need to ensure. But otherwise, it is not now that China is belligerent on the border. Once in a while it happens and we need to manage.
So, last question. All those protocols, agreements we have signed with the Chinese on peace and tranquility on the border and all that, what happens to all that? Is it just now, to be cast away because of what happened?
You see, we signed a number of agreements, as you are aware. The Border Peace and Tranquility
Yeah.
Agreement in
Yeah.
93, then the Conference Building Measures Agreement in 96, then you found the guiding principles and political parameters for resolving the
Yeah.
boundary question in 2005, Border Defense and Cooperation Agreement in 2012, 13. So these are the agreements that were signed. In addition to these agreements, there are a number of standard operating procedures that were actually decided upon and agreed upon
Mm.
by both the sides to ensure to ensure the face-offs do not escalate. But all this went out of the window in 2020.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is basically not another agreement or anything, because again that agreement
Yeah.
also will be only holding good till the
Yeah.
time both the sides agree or follow that
Mm.
agreement. So what we need to do is to tighten the already existing standard operating procedures and agreement. Like, for example, if you take your mind back to the 5th September 2020 joint statement between our foreign ministers, like Mr. Dr. Jaishankar as well as Mr. Wangi, wherein they mentioned in the last point, there is a fifth point that they mentioned, that new conference building measures need to be brought into place to ensure that the such things do not occur. What we need to do is to go through the agreements and the standard operating procedures and see how we can tighten them up is something that we need to be looking at.
So, in fact, you've told me before that, in your view, what happened at Galwan was an aberration. It was a mistake. It was not something deliberately engineered.
I can't say whether it was deliberately engineered or not, because
Hmm.
the way the Chinese came prepared with riot gear and everything tells us
Yeah.
that it was prepared one. Okay. To that extent, I wouldn't say it was not prepared. It was prepared one, and they had come with enough numbers, etc. Obviously, they had come prepared for it. So I wouldn't say that that was an aberration. The aberration was the casualties that occurred. But I think the Chinese came well prepared to do what they did.
Mhm. And you can't rule this out in the future.
We can't rule it out, but we have to make sure that we have the procedures in place to ensure that it didn't escalate to those levels where we lose men.
General Narasimhan, as always, pleasure talking to you. Great perspective and insight. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for having me on the gist.
Thank you, sir. And for those of you who joined us on this conversation, thank you for that question. There was just one, but in future shows, I'm sure we can have more. And do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media and Instagram. Thank you and good night.